same hole, and then they're going to brake and go to work. Go to work. Normally what they would have done is they would have checked the inside of the vehicle. They would have made sure that the vehicle was turned off, take the ignition out. They're going to go ahead and make sure that the keys are out, the emergency brake is on. You see them lifting the car. They're putting what we call cribbing on underneath the bottom of the vehicle. What they're doing is making a stable platform for them to cut and work off of. They want to make sure that nothing moves on the car. They've broken up. Now what they're doing is they're going through and removing the glass. And so one firefighter is walking around and he's taking out all of the side windows. One firefighter is working up front for the windshield. He's going to cut through from the bottom of it. You see how the glass isn't going to shatter on the windshield because of the type of glass that they put in the car. Once they've got all the glass taken care of, then they're going to move on to start taking care of what we call the A post, B post, or C post. Those are the posts that connect the roof to the vehicle itself. The other thing that you're not seeing that normally would happen is if we had patients inside the car, we would be covering them with blankets to prevent them from getting hit with glass and flying debris. As we're doing what we call extrication, we're going to practice something called removing the car from the patient. In other words, we're going to move the person as little as possible. We're going to move the car as much as possible. So we're going to do as much to the car as we can. You can see up front, Leon Hart and firefighters in Patrick, they're working right now. They're creating purchase points.
Come right up here. You can you see? Come right here.
So that they can go ahead and cut. So they're using what we call the spreaders. Firefighter Lance, driver engineer Lance now, has grabbed what we call the cutters, and he's going to get ready to start cutting the posts. That's going to detach the roof from the body of the car. One of the things that happens a lot in newer construction vehicles, because they're made out of more plastics and less heavy metals, is they tend to bend. And so if you watch what's going on that front door, you see that door can separate. And rather than making a clear cut, we have to work a little bit harder. So as vehicles are made of lighter and lighter materials, it actually makes it sometimes harder for us to cut into with the tools that we have. Normally, one of the things that we would have done as we're stabilizing the bottom of the vehicle is we would have gone along and popped all of the tires. Again, we want to increase the surface area between the car and the road and create as much of a stable platform to work from as we can. In this case, we didn't do that because we still have to put this on a tow truck and get it out of here later today. And so we're trying to be nice to the tow truck drivers who are donating time for us in order to get the vehicle out of here. The vehicle was donated by a private citizen from within the community for us to do this. Up on the other side of the car, you see we have one firefighter working with a sawzall or a reciprocating saw, and he's starting to cut along the posts. One of the things that we have to be careful of is we have to be careful not to cut through the seatbelt mechanism and not to cut through the mechanism that would trigger the airbags that would be side or top deployment airbags. So if he's watching to make sure where he cuts isn't going to hit one of those areas. Because we would have cut the power to the vehicle, and so prior to this, we've cut the battery cables. But normally that's something that you would have seen us done on scene as well, is we would have popped the hood, we would have cut the vehicle's power, removed sections of the battery cable. The reason for that is that will reduce the charge that's inside the capacitors that will let the airbags deploy. Again, you see two teams working off of the plan that they put together in the beginning so that we minimize the amount of time that it takes to get into the vehicle. Notice how the doors spreading apart and kind of splitting. Again, that's because it's a lighter material, lighter weight aluminum, rather than the heavier steel vehicles. Each one of our firefighters is is going to be dressed in full, what we call PPE, or personal protective equipment. And so they're going to have helmets on. They're going to have some sort of eye protection for all the things and all the mess that they're making. They're going to have gloves on as they're working. What they're trying to do on the front door is they're trying to pop what's called the nader pin, which is where now they're able to spread the door back. What they're working to do is expose the hinges so that they can take bites at the hinges and take the door off. That same process is going to be repeated on each one of the doors.
If there were a person in that car, then they work on that area close.
We're always going to work in the fastest manner to pull whoever we have out. And again, so depending on where the damage is to the vehicle, sometimes we'll have to work on the passenger side and move someone out and go that way. Sometimes we need to take the roof off and pull them up and out. If there's front-end damage, we might have to do what we call roll the dash, where we push the dashboard back away towards the engine block to create space if the steering wheel or the dashboard has been pushed in towards someone, usually in some sort of front-end or head-on collision. So the damage that's done to the vehicle and where the patient is when we show up is going to dictate where we attack the car or where we cut pieces of the car apart. You notice one firefighter is standing there holding the door while the other firefighter is working on cutting the hinges. On the other side, the banging that you hear going on, what they're doing again is trying to create that purchase point. So sometimes we'll use hand tools, what we call a halligan and an axe, and we'll pound into the vehicle so that there's a wedge that we can get the spreaders into, so that we can get far enough into the vehicle where hopefully the door doesn't come apart like you saw in that first one. So now we have the driver's door off. We're going to work on the passenger's front door. Again, if we had an injured patient in there, you would also frequently have another rescuer, if not two rescuers, that are inside trying to provide medical treatment while this is going on. And so all of what we do, we have to do not only with the safety of the crew that's in mind, but the safety of the rescuers that we put inside the vehicle as we're cutting. Notice now where we're working up on the front driver's side door, you notice he switched to the cutters instead of the spreaders. When he took the front door off, what we've done is exposed the hinges for the rear door. And so we can take those hinges off, and that's the fastest way to detach the door from the rest of the vehicle. We're also trying to minimize movement to the vehicle, because anytime we move the vehicle, not only do we risk moving the patient, but again, we talked earlier about stabilizing the vehicle. We want to make sure that the vehicle doesn't shift so that we don't have the vehicle roll, it doesn't move more. Again, that puts everybody back in more danger. You hear the loud pop as those hinges break and the cutters work through there. Pulling at the top of the door there. What we're trying to do is see how much of the door needs to move in order to get it off. So again, they're going to continue to work together, one cutting, one pulling, so that we get the door off as quickly as possible. If you notice up on the side where we have all of our equipment laid out, we've got all of our equipment laid out on tarps. The reason that we do that, these are all run off of hydraulic power, and sometimes we have to switch tools back and forth. We have a few tools that we're not using for this demonstration today, and in that case, we don't want hydraulic tools and hydraulic ends laying in the dirt. If it's laying in the dirt can get in the hydraulic line, it will clog the hydraulics, and it will reduce the strength with which the hydraulic tools run, and that may make it more difficult for us to get out. One of the reasons you frequently see us shut down a large area of a highway or a road when we go to work, we're trying to create the workspace that we need to do all of this safely, not have cars driving around us, and also take care of our tools so that we can get the patients out of the vehicles as quickly as possible. Now on this driver's side rear door, when we move back to the back of the door, that tells us that he got the hinges free on the front side of the door, and now he's working towards popping the back of the door. You see how, again, we started to have the door peel apart just a little bit. Again, that's because it's that soft body. Not made of steel. Now they're going to bend the door back. They're going to expose the portion of the door where the latch is connected. They're going to try to pop that latch. Now that door will be off as soon as that happens. We go back and look at the B posts, which again, the B posts are those posts that connect the rear of the vehicle up to the roof. Those have already been cut through. So the idea is as soon as we have the doors off, we're ready to work on taking the roof off. You can imagine that as you start adding more to a scene like this, whether it's on the side of the busy highway, if the car's down an embankment, if it's muddy, if it's snowy, if it's raining outside, it's dark, all of those things make this harder. You hear that loud pop, now that hinge is broken free, or that latch, excuse me, back of the door.
Oh yeah, I don't want to stand here. But let's watch this.
Alright, at this point,
They're going to cut the
see,
top
you
off.
probably saw him walk away. Now we have the passenger's front door taken off. Now we have one door left to go. So we're going to work that in the same manner that you saw on this side. They're going to work on taking the hinges. They're going to work on popping his back off of the latch, and then that door will be off.
That's probably good.
Now you see him walking back with the Halligan we talked about earlier, so they're going to use that to create a purchase point. That way they can get the spreaders back in there. The opening between the door and the back of the vehicle is going to be very narrow. It's too small to get the spreaders in without widening that gap a little bit with a larger tool.
I try and work the bottom hinge.
So you can probably hear them talking to each other as they're looking at what they need to do to get that door off. They're going to continue to communicate with each other and make sure that everybody's on the same page, make sure they know where tools are going, what tools are being used, make sure everyone's out of the way.
It'd be great if this only happened on sunny days, right?
It would be great if this only happened on sunny days.
Warm sunny days.
Unfortunately, that's rarely the case. Also, it'd be great if it only happened where they were sitting on their wheels, nice
Right.
on a flat level surface.
level
Absolutely.
maybe, yeah.
do have other tools that we can use if the vehicle is, say, on its side, that will stabilize the vehicle from rolling side to side.
See if somebody's right there. I did. I told them they're playing my garden.
See, you went back and grabbed the seatbelt cutter to get that seatbelt out of the way. Because the seatbelt is anchored at the top of the door and then at the bottom of the car. And if the seatbelt is still attached, you can't pull the door off. So he's cutting the seatbelt so that the door will come completely free and we can get it up and out of the way. It doesn't become a tripping hazard for us as we're trying to lift the patient in and out of the vehicle or move around the vehicle. See, he's now gone around and cut the seatbelts on each one of the corners. Allows us to make sure that the roof will come off without being attached. We've waited on cutting those final posts until right before we're ready to pull the roof off. That way it's not sitting unstable, and we don't have to worry about the roof slipping and pulling back in on a motion on our crews that are working inside on it. You can see again the same thing that happened, especially on the front door on the driver's side. The door's starting to peel a little bit and come apart in two pieces rather than one. So they're going to have to keep working to try to get in and pop that latch and make sure that the latch disengages and get the door completely off in one piece. It's a lot of hard work. The tools are heavy. There's a lot of adrenaline. You're working as quickly as you can to try to get the patients out. So there's a lot going on for these guys. In some cases, depending on how many patients are trapped, the amount of damage that you have to the vehicle, sometimes you might have more than one crew working on the same vehicle. And so you might have 4, 8, 10 guys that are all working to cut at the same time. It depends again on the amount of damage, the amount of patients. Also depends on the resources that you have available. A sunny day, we might. There's one guy in a red hat per vehicle, and so what that represents is what would be on a crew, one truck or one engine company that would respond to an accident. We try to keep those staffed with 4 people. The red hat signifies that he's in charge of that crew, and so we try to keep generally 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 ratio, so that he's got what we call span of control. After you get more than 3 or 4 people working for you, especially in a situation like this, we found that you just can't manage that.
Right. People are making too many decisions all at once.
Absolutely. And so if there were multiple red hats running around, eventually if you get enough red hats running around, then we'd get what we call a white hat running around, and so that's generally reserved for the chiefs. And so if we've got enough of us running around in red hats, a white hat's going to show up, and that is the red hats. Yep. So now you see they've got the hinges completely off where that back door was attached, and now they're just working where the latch is attached on that pin at the back of the car. Those pins, we call them nadir pins, are actually some of the strongest metal that's in the vehicle.
On the latch, mean the...
Yes, on the latch. So if you see that large round piece that sits out there, where the latch fits in, it's called a nadir pin, and that's one of the strongest pieces of metal in the vehicle. They're very difficult to cut directly through, which is why we have to work to pop things off of them. Now that all of the doors are off, then remember we've already gone through and cut each one of those posts that hold the door, that hold the roof onto the vehicle. We also made a cut along the windshield, remember, so that the windshield is no longer attached. He's going to finish the last post. One of them is using the reciprocating saw, and one of them is using the cutters. They're making sure that they coordinate the last cut and everyone having a piece of the roof, again, to make sure that that doesn't slip back down into the vehicle.
How heavy is the roof?
All depends on the vehicle. What's that? Then you're in trouble.
Then nobody knows what's happening.
That's right.
And that's not including
Now you see the roof come off. Now if we had a patient that we need to get out, we have plenty of room to lift them out without injuring them more.